Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. Today we are going to do open lines in the first hour, and it's any topic. Hour two, we are going to have one of our guests on, Ron, and then we're going to have open lines on wellness issues. And then hour three, John Moore will be back. We're going to talk about preparedness. And there's lots of news going on, so I want people to know that it's their show and their network. Now, here's a procedure. When you call the board up, and it's Randy from Monday to Thursday and Ben on Fridays, you simply tell the specific question, be specific, that you want to propose, more than one, that's fine, and the specific statements, 1, 2, 3. Try to be real and specific. That way we keep on track. Also, if you call any hour during the week, the only hour that we don't take callers is the first hour on Friday, where we answer your questions about wellness issues primarily. And we have Michelle, who's collated them all week long. She does a fantastic job. That's my beautiful and dear wife, Michelle. And she also will sometimes answer some spiritual and other questions, of course, for Messianic Christians. And we're not messy Christians, but Messianic. There's a difference. And we try to see if we can provide you the best spiritual answers as well as wellness answers. Now, medicine has its place. There is a very teeny amount of drugs that are helpful or useful or not dangerous. There's lots of surgical procedures that are actually inappropriate or done inappropriately. But there's lots that are very helpful, as well as imaging. Those who just throw the baby out with the bathwater, it's not appropriate. But unfortunately, there's not many bathwater technicians around to tell them which things to throw and which things to accept. That's my job. We're not just talking about natural medicine. We're not talking about alternative. This is integrative, molecular, genetic, functional, and toxicological intermediate metabolism medicine, and it is not an alternative. In fact, I personally think that no one should be considered a doctor, a health professional, or personal trainer unless they have this type of training in functional medicine, nutritional, molecular, genetic medicine, because how can you heal somebody if you don't know what's wrong with them? You don't know their toxic load, their particular predilections from their family history, their nutritional status, their hormonal status. It's just really not possible. And one of the technologies we use to try to help discern that is not only a good wellness history, which I'm putting together a form that'll make it easier for people to, in a template, answer the right types of questions without making it too complicated. And then also the machine, the QRMA. QRMA has been a wonderful machine for people, and we've had a number of families that have sent me their QRMA results for themselves and their immediate family. We don't set it up as a business, otherwise I get totally swamped, although we did get a request from someone, I think one of the islands, I think the Caribbean islands, that want to know what type of machine. I tell them if they get a QRMA machine, they and their immediate family are covered, but if someone wants to do testing outside that and have a full interpretation, they need to buy a machine. Of course, you want to have one anyway, because you want to be able to test yourself. And what I do is I'll take your wellness and medical history in addition to the QRMA, and I'll recommend not only conventional medical tests and advanced medical tests, but also, if necessary, functional medicine tests like lab testing direct. And they, by the way, can take specimens from anywhere in the world. You can be in Saudi Arabia or Qatar and fly the specimen in. There are special labs like McGuffey Labs that can measure zonulin which is a physical and medical test to look for the breakdown in the gut barrier. You can look for gene polymorphisms. 23andMe, well, I'm sure be coming out of the Federal Death Agency or the Food Fatal Drugs Allowed people, we call the FDA. And there are other genetic test organizations, such as in Australia and Europe and elsewhere. So we have contact with them. We also know of specialized clinics that handle all kinds of different conditions. I had an interesting consultation this morning to give you an idea of the range of questions that are asked. And it's great because I love being challenged and trying to untie knots. I did rheumatology research while in medical school for 3 years with Dr. John Woodbury, the head of the American and Canadian Arthritis Associations. And he wanted me to do a residency in rheumatology, and I, of course, transferred to the University of British Columbia and did my internal medicine training out there in 1977 before I went into family medicine at the University of Calgary, and then on to do further trauma training in Georgia at the Gaza Regional Trauma Center. So what we have is a situation where this lady had sacroiliitis, and sacroiliitis is a common condition after bowel infections. There's, in fact, infective sacroiliitis that can happen to entire ships when they come to a port and they get a specific bacteria that can trigger off spinal arthropathy and sacroiliitis. But if you have certain HLA haplotypes, HLA B27, etc., you're at higher risk. Now, there's a thing called immune homology, and I want to explain this. So whether you're a physician or non-physician, homology means there's segments of pathogens, and those proteins in the pathogen look very similar, or a food, to a body protein. And if those, for example, in the cultures that have dementia, virtually all of them, this is, I don't want to say the word absolute, but virtually all of them that do not have dementia in their population, they do not have wheat gluten in their diet. Gluten is similar to the P100 protein in the brain. It has an immune homology. If you have a pathogenic gut bacteria that's similar to a HLA haplotype, which you have to have, you're going to have migratory lymphocytes and immunoglobulins that are going to attack those body tissues. So what we think happens is there's immunological similarity in the proteins in the person's joints, etc., like in rheumatoid arthritis or scleroderma or even MS. And then the pathogen there's portions of the pathogen that look like that protein, maybe 4 or 5 or 10 amino acids, and that triggers an immunological response that attacks it. We know that recently studies done on genetically engineered human insulin, that the human insulin, because it's even made in bacteria, because it's identical to human, will actually produce an antibody response and T-cell activated attack on the pancreas beta islet cells. So in this lady, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of any stealth pathogens in her gut, turn off her inflammation, rebuild her connective tissues, and try to lower her intra-joint cytokine levels, and also find out what else is triggering it. Does she have not only gut pathogens, but does she have food allergies, other things that have any homologous activation or raised cytokine levels, like Syndrome X, we call it, or Raven syndrome, and that is elevated insulin levels. The vast majority of the population by their middle years, 75%, have Raven syndrome, which causes dyslipemia, and you may not even be overweight, but you can have abnormal lipids, or you can be turning diabetic or getting hypertensive. It's tied directly to insulin resistance and leptin resistance. Some people will get overweight, some people will get hypertensive, some people will get lipid disorders, and some people will just get bad osteoarthritis caused by elevated cytokine levels. So that's how we'll attack that, and that gives you an idea of our approach, or my approach to wellness, which is molecular and genetic. I mean, evidence-based. So when people try to say that there's no evidence for this, they're just wrong, okay? So I use immunology labs, organic acids, gene SNPs, polymorphisms. I look at advanced testing for immunological testing of gut pathogens through labs like Great Plains, Great Smokies, Genova Labs, a whole range of them. There are federally certified, internationally certified laboratories that can look at specific abnormalities. And you can start off with the wellness medical history using the amazing intuitive knowledge that you're going to get from a QRMA. And the QRMA test takes a minute. What it does, though, and there's 3 groups of tests. The first group is that 1/3 are easily interpreted. You just look at it and say, oh, I'm deficient in XYZ, or I've got heavy metals. The second group of tests requires some medical training to understand them, but they're relatively straightforward if you have some medical or wellness or functional medicine or chiropractic training, nutritional training. And then the third group are really pretty esoteric. Unless you have advanced knowledge, you're not going to be able to understand them at all, which is why you have to integrate with their wellness history and with other things you know about the person. Then you can decide if you need to do functional medicine testing or advanced imaging or other tests to figure out what's going on. Unless you know what's going on, you have no way of actually knowing if you're actually fixing things. For example, the average conventional, let's say, diabetic doctor slaps all their diabetics on drugs that actually increase diabetes, which is not good. They use things like beta blockers, which will increase diabetic changes, and interfere with CoQ10. They put people on HMG-CoRe reductase, again, that hits CoQ10, and mitochondrial energy metabolism, which is very bad in diabetics in the first place. So you don't want to do that. What you want to do is find out what the problem is. That's why nutraceuticals like our leptin metabolic that lowers insulin and leptin resistance, diabetoline, which is in double-blind studies that has been shown to actually reverse diabetes and bring, if people are compliant and take 2 twice a day, will have a dramatic decrease in insulin resistance, which you can measure. If you measure their fasting and 2-RPC blood insulin, not just sugar, you can see the milliunits of insulin are improving. If you follow over time their hemoglobin A1C, which is a pretty blunt test, you can only do it about every 6 months, otherwise it's not a very good marker. But are there other tests that are available that can measure much more quick improvements when you change the diet? Back in a moment, your questions, 800-259-5791. Well, that's IGY from Donald Fagan, and it is a glorious time. I mean, although we have problems, and we have horrible problems, in fact, it's almost like the abscess of the geopolitical world is welling up to the skin surface, and it's now we know where the abscess is. And, of course, the pimple on the abscess is Obama, but he's not the abscess. He's a symptom. He's just the actor-in-chief. And, of course, he has an attitude. I mean, he's recently dissed some of the people in Congress saying, "Sue me," thinking, I've got a phone and I've got a pen and I'm going to call my buddies, my globalist, fascist, Nazi buddies, and they're going to, whether in big business or big government, and they're going to do ya. Just like he recently made some pretty serious attacks against Mr. Putin, who they all personally know each other now. And I don't think Putin's comments about Obama were pretty funny. This is last year. He said, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, because I consider it one of the best jokes of the year of last year, 2013, is that Putin said that playing a game of chess or board game with Obama is like playing board games with a pigeon that struts around the chessboard, knocking over the pieces, and then when he knocks them over, pronounces that he has won the game, which is not too good negotiating with a pigeon. And I guess that's what he assumes that Mr. Obama's competency and brain level is, because he really is remarkably incompetent. And, of course, the people behind him are making him remarkably incompetent, because I don't think even the evil people know exactly what they want to do and how they're going to prosecute it. And the people that are really rich, that aren't evil, and there's a lot of them, by the way, that are millionaires and billionaires, that just don't understand this and realize it's bad for business, they're totally freaked out. And I appeal to them to actually try to put the restraint on them as well. It's not just the average person in the street that's a mom-and-pop business running work, or the middle class. It's the billionaires and the millionaires that stand to lose a lot. If you're on the wrong side of the tracks, remember there were some fairly rich billionaires that disappeared with that giant steamboat went into the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, the sinking of the Titanic. And it was all planned out. Most people don't realize it was all planned out, that some of these billionaire families weren't going along with the plan at Jekyll Island. They talk about the creature from Jekyll Island. They weren't going along with the plan, which is to create a new financial order, and to start off with the 100-year plan in 1913 to set up the so-called Fed Reserve, which is neither federal nor reserve. It's a foreign bank system with the main shareholders and, if you want to call it, bank controllers being European, which I find kind of bizarre. But it means that America's been recaptured and recolonized by the bankers from Europe, which is why we had the American Revolution in the first place. So as hard as that is to believe, and as shocking as it is to believe, it's true. Now, the latest, of course, in terms of world news, I want to open this can of worms up, is we have a rising death toll, and even Obama is having to kind of say he's concerned about the number of Israeli-caused deaths in Gaza. I mean, even stories and pictures of a woman in a wheelchair with a white flag trying to wave in front of her property before the tanks run in and crush her or her family. This is pretty disgusting behavior on the part of the Israelis. And by the way, as they move further into Gaza City, a lot of the Israeli soldiers are getting killed too, so the Israeli government doesn't really give a dang about the Israeli soldiers are going to die going into an area where it basically is a kill box, as they say in the military. I don't think this is going to solve the problem. My suspicion is the reason why Israel is moving now on Gaza City and on these rockets is because they expect a Middle Eastern war will cause a full-out, all-out attack by an overwhelming barrage of rockets that Israel, with Iron Dome and Patriot 2, cannot defend themselves. And if you go beyond the number of missile battery rockets, which are quite expensive, your towns and cities are in danger of chemical weapons, fuel air bombs, biological weapons. In fact, if you hit them, you're more likely to disperse them widely over an area. So the Israelis are really, they're in a pickle. And Obama, if he was a real president, could operate from a position of strength, close off the tunnels to Egypt and the smuggling of weapons in, restrain the Israelis from being maniacs, slowly dismember the weapon systems from surrounding Muslim countries, sit on the Israelis so they don't start a nuclear war by attacking Russia or anybody else, because that's next. We know that there's alternate viewpoints, but I think the one that holds up the most water, even though Russia will not admit it, that there was probably an attempt against the life of Mr. Vladimir Putin. He's already had 8 previous attempts. So it's pretty logical that the bankers want him dead. The European bankers, and they certainly, after coming back from the BRICS meeting where they put down $100 billion to start a new alternative to the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, that would rile up the bankers. There's nothing that ticks them off more than taking away their ability to print money out of thin air. And we know the last 2.5 centuries, all the wars have been started by bankers. And previous to that, it was basically, the royal families fighting each other because the rabble were starting to become and the lords were becoming too powerful in Europe, so they decided to start wars to kind of clean up the rabble. So it's all really the same thing. It comes down to money, power, and territory. So now we have a situation where they have hope for a ceasefire is overshadowed by clashes, rising death tolls. It's just way out of control. And the Ukrainian separatists are allowing bodies to depart and agreeing to hand over the information, the bodies from the Malaysian Flight 17. The fact is that the so-called rebels can barely defend themselves from shelling, let alone the idea of firing at 33,000 feet using advanced radar, a Buk missile from Russia, which they can't do. The Kiev government does have that capability, but even Mr. Poroshenko doesn't really have a real good reason other than try to see if he could frame the Eastern European so-called breakaway republics from doing that. And if they ever do have elections, include the so-called breakaway republics, which is being called for by the United Nations, he'll be voted of office, even if he's an oligarch. So I don't see either one of them really gaining a lot by doing this. The ones who do have something to gain are the Israelis, who are totally freaked out that the Syrian destruction of Syria didn't occur with the American brokered and the Israeli, Saudi Arabian, Qatar, America, NATO attack against the sovereign state of Syria. And this situation has caused a big disaster. The oil fields that were recently taken in northeast Syria are being taken back by Bashar al-Assad, who received his third term in office in a landslide victory. They're not being crushed and pushed into the ocean. And any air attack against Syria means half the country is mountainous, and they certainly have the S-300 anti-aircraft system from Russia. It's basically a war with Syria is a war with Russia. A war with Russia is World War III. And do you want American cities on fire for nuclear weapons that we can't defend ourselves from? Because I took care of employees working at U.S. Space Command Strategic Defense Star Wars. And whether you're talking about the plasma interferometry weapon system that's up in the upper atmosphere at 80,000 feet, or the theater air defense THAAD, which is far more advanced than the Patriot system, which I saw intimate details of, both in their media center underground and from their scientists and technicians, we don't have a missile defense system that's not extremely leaky from the kind of weapons that Russia has. Which means instead of 12 really deads, you're 11 really deads. So if you have fools like Obama continue pushing, you're going to have American cities on fire. So wake up, Republicans and Democrats. Impeach Obama, get the bankers out of our White House, and his puppet, their puppet, Soros' puppet, Obama. Welcome back, and remember, it is your show. That's why wherever you are in the world, you can call 800-259-5791. We have lines open for you to call in on any topic, health or wellness, geopolitical, spiritual, whatever topic. But you have to do two things. You've got to make a point, meaning ask specific questions and make a specific statement to our board operator, because I do screen calls. I want to make sure it's on topic, it's not ranting. You can attack anybody, but you have to attack basically their arguments. You can't just do ad hominem. And some of the rules we have is we don't attack other hosts on this or other networks, but we do, dissect and do an intellectual autopsy on arguments that people make that is bad, or destructive, or just plain stupid. And most of those things are self-evident. We don't need to point out who's doing this or that, or who's an inside government op or whatever. If you're not smart enough to figure it out, we're not going to tell you, because that's the whole point. The point of this show is to get you to ask better questions, because if you don't ask the question, you don't own the truth. If you don't own the truth, you're not going to defend it with your life. If you don't defend it with your life, we don't really have a country. We've got a bunch of sheep that are inside a pen. And that's what the government wants to treat you as. That's why the medical system has medical bullies trained to try to bully you. That's why the geopolitical system tells you you've got representative government. And we're going to have a great show on Thursday with Deborah Tavares. Since the 1930s, they have kind of done one of the final steps to move us to a state of since martial law, which is why executive orders by the chief administrator, Obama, because he's not really a president, he's acting almost in a state of war to do executive orders. That's why they're trying to basically make our Congress and Senate vestigial, because to a great extent they are. They ignore them. I think our Congress and Senate could just take our powers back. We could, in the process, arrest and impeach Mr. Obama, make sure that there's no corporate money that's in politics. Anybody should be able to be a president or a congressman. I don't care if you're a roofer or you're a carpenter or a baker. You should be able to do one term, like the rule of Cincinnatus in politics, and then go back to your job. You get paid well when you're doing your job as president or a congressman or a congresswoman. And I think that we should also have a much tougher policy in terms of who we let into the country, but it should be much, much faster and much more efficient. So if somebody wants to come from Guatemala and they've got a specific job skill and they've got a good family and there's no criminal record, make it fast, efficient, and not expensive to learn how to be an American and get here. And when we have refugees like those children down in Guatemala and these other countries, whoever caused it, including whether it's us, they're refugees. They're not immigrants. Let them in. Send air-conditioned buses. Don't let them die in the river. When we have teenagers with MS-13, the first place they should go should look like a prison, because we need to go to their consulate and find out who the hell these kids are, if they've got tattoos on them or they have attitudes or it looks like they're trying to join a gang, because it's a different class or a different group of people. And many of the people that even are recruited from these countries to serve in our military, once they get the golden ticket to come in and become an American, these people were previously criminals. They go into our military and get further skill sets, and then they come into the country and join some criminal organization like a drug cartel or whack Americans. That's not acceptable. And we could close that off pretty quickly and easily. And secondly, we should send Delta Force and these other guys to clean out the rat's nest. I mean, I don't understand why the Israelis wait to the last minute to stop the tunnels bringing in the weapons and the rockets and all the other garbage in Gaza. You don't go into schoolyards and blow up people and disable people's places, or little girls with phosphorus bombs. They just simply had to go with the Egyptians and close off those tunnels, and that would have been the end of that foolishness. They need to start migrating those people to Jordan, which is the actual country where they should be, because that's their homeland, is the country of Jordan. And it doesn't matter if the Jordanians don't want to accept them. We, as Americans, should force them, because that's where they were placed there by the United Nations, and that will fix the problem. But an open-air prison where we set up make a crisis is stupid. And it makes both the Israelis murderers, and it makes the Gazans trying to defend themselves also contribute to a disaster that's going to kill innocent Israelis as well. So we don't have two good guys here. We get bad guys, but the worst bad guy is Israel and America, because we're always fomenting division, balkanization, which is why after several wars now in Iraq, all we've done is to actually partition the country. And most of the oil wells now are going to go to Iran, which is what we didn't want to have happen. And our former leader, Mr. Maliki, is now asking for the planes back from Saddam Hussein that went to Iran and allying himself with Russia. So what do we accomplish? We put ourselves into a real mess. And we're really good at that, because our military-industrial intelligence complex thinks it's funny that they can create future crises to continue business as required, forever selling tanks, rocket-propelled grenades, surface-to-air missiles that destroy other countries. If the only thing we sold them were textbooks, how to build schools, solar farms that would not produce electro pollution, and with special, deep well drilling things so they have water in these countries, clean drinking water, so they could have kind of small pilot industries where they could do high-tech stuff, the world would change completely. There's just no excuse for what we're doing to these other countries. We have intelligent people in all these countries. That's where civilization started. And for us to constantly go in and balkanize because it's to the advantage of our bankers to go and destroy populations of people is, I think, insane. And, America is being made to look out like a bully and a danger to the entire world, and eventually it's going to turn on us. And if a real war does start, we're going to not only have countries that could really hurt us bad, like Iran, hitting us with EMP and biological weapons, which they have, but also big countries like Russia that have advanced nuclear and other weapon systems, weather weapons, etc., that can really hurt us or kill most of us. So let's get real. War is obsolete. And what we have to do is, if we turn to Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, if we actually really repented and realized that the head of Russia is now stating his country is strong because it's now a Christian nation, not a communist nation, it's a post-communist era, if we realize that Islam needs to reform and realize that Jesus is returning, as they say, but he's not Isa going to convert everybody to Islam, as he's actually come and visited people in these Muslim countries and said, I'm Jesus, but I'm not coming back as a servant of Muhammad. I'm the incarnation of the Creator God. then we'd have a little different attitude on the part of Muslims. Muslims would then realize, because they say they accept the Old Testament and the New, and they accept Jesus, but they call him another prophet like Muhammad. He's not. He is the incarnation of the creator of the universe. And if we approached it that way, if we approached the message that Jesus said, which we talk about the red letter Bible of some of the founders of the nation, about how that important that is, if we actually took the words of Jesus himself, maybe we would have the Prince of Peace return and we wouldn't blow ourselves up or see the devastation of our magnetosphere, our ionosphere, our oceans, our food supply, stupid genetic engineering, and all the other things, including a corrupt medical system, geopolitical system, educational system, so it trains people not to think. And anybody who does think is either thought of as being a psychotic or a pariah. That's a problem. You remove all the pariahs and you have a state like 1984. And so what we're trying to do here is quite unique. In the sense I'm a political agnostic, I see a lot of people that I consider, and I'm not going to mention specific names, let's say, except for specific individuals perhaps, maybe that are not hosting. But I think a lot of people that are out there, whether it's overt or covert, or just by the very fact that they have mental and other issues, they're acting as, in a sense, an operative of the if you want to call it the chaos. The chaos, which of course is the author of chaos, is of course the Dark One, the Satan, the opposer of the people of Earth. And see, we're on the edge of the singularity. I know as a member of the Academy, and I'm going to bring back Dr. Ron Klatz, we're on the edge of a biological singularity. You can tell the doctors are in a state of shock. We're in the post-biological era where antibiotics are going to be available to kill off bugs. We have multi-drug resistant TB. If you get it in Johannesburg, South Africa, it's called XMDR-TB. You got 21 days and you're going to meet your maker. There's absolutely nothing in the ICU we can do to stop you from dying. If you got multi-drug resistant, you're in a big mess. And it's coming out from Central and South America. We got Ebola spreading like a wildfire in Africa. We've got H7N9 and much more. Methicillin-resistant Staph aureus everywhere, even in gyms. And we think we have things under control? Not. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And it's a Monday. It's the 21st, believe it or not. And, after a little monologue, I tell people it's, really their show. The real thing is reality is participatory. You really don't want to. Number one, you want to know what reality is. And that's I call the mathematics of 0 and 1. Where are you as a being? What is the universe? And we try to answer that to a great extent. On this program, we also give you more information that you're not going to get even if you're, quote, a high-level, esoteric a devotee that's been told all kinds of mixed garbage and lies in the high levels of the Masonic orders of whatever religion, whether it's Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or any other order, including the transhumanists, and the scientific maniacs that think somehow they're going to merge with technology like Ray Kurzweil. So what you need to understand is that we're real close to the singularity. I mentioned I was going to bring on Dr. Ron Klatz, founder of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And when you talk to various pundits, they tell you that we're between 10 and maximum 30 years away from basically immortality. And they're right. But we're also probably 5 to 10 years away from annihilation. We have a little problem. Because when you keep on trying to start World War III, when you keep destroying the oceans and the ozone layer with geoengineering the upper atmosphere, when you don't prepare for near-space objects, the return of a dwarf star called Nemesis with a small orbital group of objects around it. When you hide sequestered, we call advanced 23rd century science plus from the population that could solve a lot of our environmental and energy problems, when you basically promulgate wars and the destruction of the biology of the planet with everything from smart meters to GMO food to fluoridated water, that destroy the biology of most of the population on the planet, including little animals like bees that make food edible and taste good, because other than non-pollinated food is basically good for making gruel. You create a gruel culture. And of course people say, well, why would they do that? Well, you can't use logic because you're not dealing with good, normal, sensible people. You're dealing with evil. And that's really hard for people to use that word. Evil is the word live backwards. So it's a good way to look at it. Live, L-I-V-E, evil, is live backwards. And it's hard for people to use that word. In the 21st century now, 21st century, it doesn't matter if you're going into the medical field or geopolitical field or dental field. I mean, I as an iconoclast, as a child that would ask too damn many questions, I realized the reason why people say you're smarter is because you're more of a pain in the butt. You ask questions. It can either get you more advanced depending on what position of power you're in, or it can get you in a heck of a lot of trouble. And, just talking about my own personal situation, I was the director of ACMED for Health South in 1997, and the director for the national director, Bob Stoner, came into my office, and he said in Denver, I had a huge office, about 6,000 square feet, including operating theaters and x-ray machines and a whole bevy of staff to handle lots of people coming in for occupational evaluations, toxicological tests, tests for advanced functional medicine tests with, exercise physiologists and all kinds of good stuff. And we do everything from, surgery on you to casting you up to functional testing to respiratory fit to radiation testing, everything you could imagine, even medical review officer testing to see what drugs you had in you. And it was quite funny because Bob said, you got to close these 32 cases because we have upset industry. Not an upset patient, upset industry. That if we don't close them, we're going to lose business. Business, It reminds me of the movie by Charles Dickens, The Christmas Carol. Your business is mankind. And, of course, he said, and I said, well, 4 of them, if I close those cases, they're going to die. He said, is that a problem? We were thinking about giving you a $500,000 bonus. Now, that's not only the first time that Dr. Deagle is coming against problems. I remember back in one of my first real memorable occasions was in grade 1, where I was at a private Catholic school, and nun, Sister Marie Blackie, was telling a little story, which I knew was patently not true, to all the children. And I said, Sister Marie Blackie, what you said to the children is a figment of your imagination. This is in front of the class, and you're full of rope. And she took me out and strapped me in the hallway, and she said, is that enough? I don't know. Are you tired? I said to her. And I remember this when I was in fourth year medical school. I met her, actually. She was at the Halifax Infirmary Hospital, and she had already quit the nunnery and had 5 kids. I guess maybe I was one of the causes for her quitting. But I remember you're different than any other kid I ever met. I said, yeah, because I asked questions. And I wasn't afraid to ask the questions or tell the truth. Now, all of us have a limited number of days, weeks, and years. I'm pretty darn healthy. I exercise every morning. I exercise in the afternoon. I take tons of supplements. And I've gotten over health issues that have, a lot of other people would really get them in a lot of trouble, but I've gotten over health issues that have been pretty remarkable. And the thing is that you have to tell the truth. You got to live with yourself. Ultimately, as you get older and you start to realize it doesn't matter if your relatives don't like you, your colleagues don't like you. You know what's important? God likes you. You know what's important is that the truth likes you. It's important that you can go to sleep at night knowing you didn't hasten the death of someone or disability of someone or cause the devastation of someone or went and sided with a group, whether it's the crazy Israelis or the crazy Gazans or the Muslims or the crazy bankers or whatever, siding with a group that actually was going to cause death, destruction, and evil to someone else. And the world would be a better place if people would grow a backbone. This is a backbone central. If you don't have a backbone, listen to the program, call in, make a statement. It's not a place for you to rant, unless you have a real good rant. If you have a really good rant and you make some specific points, by all means, tell us a list of questions, tell us what you want to say, because it's your show. You have to understand this. We have a huge footprint now worldwide. We're on ABC affiliates, micro broadcasters, pirate stations all over America, Canada. People listen on iPhone apps and Android all over the world. We pay for it on K-band satellite North and South America, Dish Network across Europe, Britain, North Africa, the whole Middle East, China and Russia, and all the republics like Azerbaijan, etc. We do that because we want to rain down the truth that God gave us. So there's only one truth. As Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and life. He is. He's God incarnate. But he also said, when I return, you shall be as I am. So we're literally becoming the children of the Most High when we tell the truth, when we live for God, and when we don't know, we consult him, which is we don't take from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, figuring we can figure it out ourselves, no matter how, quote, smart we think we are, because we're not. But we go to God. And when we read his book, his Bible, when we pray, when we talk to other godly people and ask for counsel, and we check to see whether or not we discern the spirits if it's true or not, and don't assume because they're Christians they're always right. Use your intellect, which you have your own brain, and then go off and pray and then try to get a confirmation in your spirit. And whether it's a medical question, and you don't have to believe what we say. In fact, I had an interesting email this morning about a gentleman who said, I don't believe a word you say. Well, tell us which words those words are. He was just specifically talking as a pastor about something about high-level masonry. Well, let's put it this way. My knowledge is not complete in high-level masonry, but it's considerably higher than probably most people listening to the show anywhere on the planet. And unfortunately, what I know, you don't want to know. It's pretty ugly. And for those people who think that they're a devotee and understand it, I've ministered to 90th degree Masons, and they didn't know what I knew. So that's not funny. And you have to realize that our world is in a grip of evil that transcends just plain we call greed, because greedy people aren't necessarily evil. You have lots of rich people who are really good at making money, but a lot of those people are actually pretty decent. And they're freaked out by this. In fact, I remember back in 2009, I was approached by a producer, Hollywood producer, actually, who was doing a blog for me on the side, an anonymous blog. And he said, can I copy your shows and your other video materials and give them to our millionaire and billionaire buddies? I said, by all means. If it raises questions, if it makes them think better about an issue, if it makes them use whatever power or influence they have to influence their rich and powerful buddies as to what policies are going to take place, for God's sake, let's do it. Because we're pushing the rock of Sisyphus. You know the old Greek story about pushing the rock up the mountain, and it would, of course, go to the top of the mountain, roll back down again. So Sisyphus would kept on pushing it. If we push it, all of us will hold the rock up there, and it won't ever roll back down. We aren't going to, as I say, the human singularity of immortality, literally biological immortality, is about 10 to 20 years away. But we're 5 to 10 years away, basically, from annihilation if we don't stop this crap. So let's face reality. Let's solve this problem. Let's get away from toxic polypharmacy and use only the minimum and safe drugs, safe surgery, which is only about 2/3 of what surgery is being done when it's done correctly. Let's get into geopolitics where we have representative government. They're strong, independent nations. And as it says in the Bible, if all the nations don't come down to Jerusalem when the Lord rules, they will not receive a blessing during that reign. Well, guess what? Those days are coming, because the end of evil, I can see it. Back in a moment with Hour 2.